what is the best way to simplify a complex issue in order to explain it to a client or a member of your team? Hi guys, my name is Deepak Shukla, founder at the Pearl Lemon Group. We're a business growth and development agency based in the UK, USA, as well as serving clients worldwide. And here today in day number 69, we're here to talk about ultimately simplifying complex issues. But before we get into it, if you need any support with your communications training, whether internally or with your clients, feel free to reach out to us, as well as clicking the link below to get access to 7 additional strategies not shared in this training. So look, fundamentally, you're going to get clients that sometimes need an explanation of something that's quite complex, and it's a struggle, especially when your client's not technically oriented, or the nature of what you're trying to explain is complex, and your client might not have the base knowledge, and you still are struggling to potentially understand the issue yourself. So there's these range of scenarios that you'll encounter, but let's jump straight to potential solutions for this. So first of all, you want to ultimately be able to explain it to, and let's build out the list of things that you want to do. Let's do it here. 1, do you really understand it yourself? So that's just the first thing to be cognizant of. Like, do you actually understand it yourself? Because that will then directly feed into your ability to explain it in a simple fashion. Really, and I've seen this happen in my team, the true sign of an understanding of a subject is your ability to explain it simply. Okay, so you need to have the ability to explain it to somebody who doesn't have any knowledge of the ultimately context yourself. So you need to recognize and see if you really understand it yourself. So the way that you should consider that then is, can or could you explain it to an 11-year-old? Okay, so if you could explain it to an 11-year-old, or could you explain it to, I think about, could I explain it to my mum who's 66 years old and dropped out of school when she was 14? Could you explain it to someone of that ilk? And think about whether you can, and if you can, try and explain it to that person. Okay, so do you really understand it yourself? Could you explain it to, for example, an 11-year-old? That's the second question you need to ask, right? So the third question you need to consider is, can you remove and or explain all of the relevant jargon? So understanding, the jargon and explain it without using any of the jargon is always a powerful skill. So elements of this really relate to ultimately what we cover in the cold calling training series that I've got. So if you want to check that out, I'd recommend looking or Googling, not Googling, YouTubing, cold calling training, Pearl Lemon sales, and you'll find a lot of our content there about cold calling and building the elevator pitch. But yeah, can you explain and or remove all of the relevant jargon? The full thing to consider, how much of the jargon, if any, does your prospect or does the listener understand? So, depending upon who the listener is, you need to know who the listener is. You might explain stuff without really getting a proper understanding or feel of people's working knowledge of the subject or concept. So you need to understand their comfort level, and then that will dictate what simplification in this context means. Simplification of a complex issue for someone who's got a working knowledge of, for example, web development is quite different from simplification of someone who doesn't even know, what a PC or what a computer is. So that's something that you need to really consider as well. So that's the fourth thing. The fifth thing to consider is thinking in terms of analogies. So an analogy is, so what we're trying to do here, you can think of Google Analytics as being a little bit like your end of day report when, you because you've got 17 cafes, George, at the end of the day, you might ask Judy, well, how's the site in Richmond doing? How's the site in here doing? How many people do we have coming to the store? how much money went through the tills. So Google Analytics gives you an ability to ask those same questions of your website. So do you see there how I'm giving an analogy of how Google Analytics works from a reporting perspective, from someone, for example, who had run multiple cafes and they understand that they get their end of day or end of week reports. So thinking in terms of analogies and using them or calling upon them is going to be really, really powerful. Not enough people do this. Use analogies as much as you can, because then you can ultimately relate it to the prospect. And this is the other thing, that the coffee analogy, for example, if I use that with someone who's, a scientist, then it would be really offbeat. So make the examples contextually relevant, meaning that, explain the cafe example to someone who has multiple cafes or who works in the cafe, or someone. Basically, you need to try and place the example or the explanation within the context of someone's life and someone's experiences, because that's going to make it a much easier for them to grasp. But so I actually remember from Dude, Where's My Car, that a guy was able to explain all of philosophy to someone who had an exam coming up by relating it to wrestling, because wrestling was something that he intimately understood, or they both understood, whilst one of them understood philosophy. So he used wrestling analogies throughout. So thinking about analogies, making the examples contextually relevant is really, really important. And then 7 is try again. So when I say try again, what I mean by that is that sometimes you'll walk into a call and you won't have the opportunity to really think about items 1 through, let's say, 4. But when you have the try again option, you can say, okay, that explanation clearly was confusing. I'm sorry about that. Let's try again. I'm just curious. Do you watch football? And you can ask them for something that they understand or that you are comfortable with from an analogy perspective, and you can try and place it in those terms. If you can't think of an analogy or an area that you can provide an example, then just say, you know what, let me try and come at this differently. And you can just try the explanation twice. Remember, within every phone call, you get a grace period where you can try again the second time to try and have a do-over. So there you have it, guys. These are the 7 ways to try and simplify a complex issue in order to explain it to a client or a member of your team. And the 8th one also is bring in some support or ask, which is kind of one that's you should be doing anyway. But bringing in some support means, Eon, can you help, for example, or Richard, can you help if you've got someone on the call with you and perhaps they can have a go at explaining it, or just ask for advice generally within your team to say, look, I don't think I'm communicating this clearly to Frank, our client, can you help? So there you have it, actually, the 8 ways to simplify complex issues to explain it to clients or your team. And guys, please do subscribe if you're enjoying these videos. I hope that you are. I put a lot of effort into these as I'm doing them. And yeah, please leave your comments and takeaways below. Thank you so much.